and thank you. Item 3, approval of the minutes of the November 4th, 2020 special meeting.
Approval.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Item 4, approval of the minutes of the November 11th, 2020 regular meeting.
Approval.
Motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion or corrections? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Item 5, review and approve 2020 ambulance account write-offs presented by County Manager Ben Y. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
We can.
I got put in quarantine on Sunday, so I'm at home with not much good internet, but it seems to be working so far. So thanks to you guys. I don't know that I'll share my screen. I don't know if you guys have the packet with you to follow along. Otherwise, I can try to share my screen and have it.
I think
we've got it. Thank you.
We've got
Okay.
it. Thank you, Julie.
So the outstanding ambulance accounts receivables are reviewed on an annual basis to determine their collectability. Those charges outstanding that are deemed uncollectible are written off, so the ambulance accounts receivable balance reflects a realistic number as required by GAAP. So in 2019, the city had 3,482 ambulance runs, with total charges exclusive of contractual amounts being a little over 2.7 million. So attached is the resolution, which if approved would authorize the write-off of 32,000 of outstanding ambulance accounts receivables as uncollectible. So now that we have LifeQuest on Exhibit A, we kind of have, they write off stuff that they know is uncollectible right away, and then we still have our old accounts receivable when we used to do it. So we kind of do the mix of stuff we write off from what we used to have and then what LifeQuest does. So I just put it as 1031. Those numbers might change a little bit, but that it's still going to be 32,000. So these write-offs are for patients that are typically hard to contact from out of the area or do not have medical insurance. Where appropriate, these accounts have been turned over to a local collection agency or put into TRIP. And now LifeQuest does most of that as well, but we still have some older ones on those programs. So I recommend the Fire and Police Commission forward this resolution to go before the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee as well.
So do we have any questions for Amy on the write-offs? The only comment I have, fairly consistent numbers. And the point, Amy, is that they don't quit, even though we do write it off, they don't quit trying to collect.
Correct. And then we do get some occasionally that have been written off and we still collect on them. It's mostly just housekeeping, bookkeeping.
Any questions or comments on the $32,000 write-off? I'll entertain
approval of the $32,000 write-off.
Thank you, Andy. Second.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Any other discussion? If we could go ahead and do a roll call, please.
Earl?
Yes.
Meese?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Keough?
Yes.
Gershman?
Yes. Thank you. Item 6, approval of fire department bills.
Good morning. Thank you. We have 2 sets of bills, one signed by Commissioner Keough on November 16th and one signed by Commissioner Gershman on December 1st. Looking through the bills, I really didn't see anything that popped out at me as far as unusual payments and stuff like that or purchases. Pretty standard month. I'd be happy to answer any questions and ask for your approval.
Any questions? I just have one question. There was a couple of pieces of fitness equipment that were purchased. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So we receive money for having a gym that's open to the entire city. So I believe it's around $5,000 or $6,000 a year. I'd have to look at the exact number, but we purchased a Jacob's ladder, and basically what that is I've heard other words for it because it is pretty brutal as far as a workout. It's basically a ladder that keeps on moving, and it moves with your inertia and your weight. then it is a pretty good workout. So I think it'll be a good piece of fitness equipment for us, especially for the fire department, as it kind of really rolls into what we do here. So we decided to move forward with that purchase. That pretty much closed out the funds for our fitness equipment budget this year.
Any other questions or comments on the fire department bills? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion. Motion to approve. Yep, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Earl,
Yes.
Meese,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Keo,
Yes.
Gershman.
Yes, thank you. Item 7, Assistant Chief Zepp's approval of police department bills.
Morning. In front of you, you have two sets of bills. One is signed by Commissioner Myers on the 19th of November. The other signed by Commissioner Earl on the 2nd of December. The real item of note is we did make another vehicle purchase of a 2020 Jeep Cherokee for our detective bureau at the price of $34,313. This was something that was worked out earlier in the year. We were able to take this out of next year's budget and basically buy it this year with the offsetting of the vehicles that we're going to sell. This was covered with Finance Director Ron Aumann. So with that, we have that in place. And so next year we'll actually be buying 2 vehicles. Hopefully we'll have the rest of the vehicles sold here, but if it goes into a little bit in January, Ron said that was not a problem. Our squad switchover company's a little backed up with COVID, so the delay could be there, but eventually the costs will offset each other. So this puts our detective bureau in a great spot, and we'll be revisiting, excuse me, with Lieutenant Esther, how often we actually need to switch these cars out. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions and would look for your approval.
Any questions at all for Pat? Pat, I have a question. Is this our first Jeep Cherokee? I don't think we've had one in the past, have we?
Yeah, this is actually our second one, and the detective who ran the first one liked it so much that we shopped around a little bit. We were able to we're still getting really competitive prices through V&H with the government fundings or the government pricing. So it's our second one and it's worked well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, I'll look for a motion of approval of police department bills.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mike. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If we could have a roll call, please.
Earl,
Yes.
Meese,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Keo,
Yes.
Gershman.
Yes. Item 8, fire department activities, training reports, and correspondence packet.
Okay, I'd like to start out right away. I have had a few conversations with Scott over the past month since our last meeting. So just wanted you all to know, in case you haven't heard from him, that he is doing well on the road to recovery and targeting January 5th as his date to clear his medical procedures. And then he'd need to pass a hazmat physical on top of that. So I think we're targeting probably early to mid-January on Scott's return. So good news on Scott that he is doing well.
Good.
And I'm sure you're all aware that DC Bacus has been deployed on DMAT. I believe he sent an email to you guys. He's been gone since November 29th, and he will be returning to work on the 14th. So looking forward to his return next Monday. Just a couple of things I want to note, as well as a COVID update. On pages 8F through 8Q, you'll notice we received 3 donations for Andy the ambulance, totaling $1,509.67, as well as a hazmat quarterly payment from the state in the amount of $2,078.16. We appreciate all the donations for fire prevention. However, I'd like to talk to you guys about one specifically. It was a donation in the amount of $9.67. We had a first grader come in with her mom, and she wanted to donate her tooth fairy money to the fire department, which absolutely melted all of our hearts here at the fire station. Really, really cool little girl. It was tough taking her money, but she really wanted it to go to the fire station and specifically earmarked it for Andy, the ambulance. So we did send her a thank you letter and plan on doing a little something for her for Christmas. So we also let her know that as soon as we can take these masks off, she's going to get a special tour down here at the fire department. So just with everything going on in the world, you know, that was a really, really cool thing. Just wanted to pass that along as a brighten my day, that's for sure. So I'll move on to the COVID update, if you don't mind. Let me get there it is. We currently have 1 personnel out on COVID, and that's just a quarantine. They haven't tested positive. It's due to their spouse testing positive. So this employee is trying to quarantine herself as best as possible in the same household. So we decided to just leave this person off on COVID leave just to be safe. Emergency staffing plan is going to stay in place until we can get through the surge. I didn't think it made a whole lot of sense, even though right now we don't have a whole lot of cases or quarantines going on. I think we all know that after Thanksgiving and after Christmas, hopefully we can get over those 2 humps and see where we're at. So we're just going to leave the emergency staffing plan in place, so we don't have to, you know, cancel it and then restart it again. We continue to do internal contact tracing on our members. Thankfully, we haven't had to do that in the last few weeks. Telling staff if they have symptoms to stay home. Continue to sanitize the station and all apparatus, especially the ambulances. When they have a positive patient, that gets sprayed down immediately, and when it returns, employees are encouraged to wash their clothes immediately after and take a shower as well. Continue with the temperature checks, social distancing as much as possible. Masks stay on at all times, unless you're in your office by yourself or your dorm room. We are well stocked in PPE right now. Steve has been doing a good job of that, keeping us stocked up on PPE. Fire inspections are still on hold until we get past the surge. I don't think it's necessary to put our folks out there and possibly bring back COVID or vice versa, spread it throughout. We almost completed all of our inspections. We had a few stragglers hanging out there, so I think we're in pretty good shape as far as fire inspections are concerned. So hoping to get a start by mid-January if we're past the surge at that time. We do have new quarantine rules in place. I don't know if you've all heard that. So there's a 7-day and a 10-day. We're still working through how we're going to manage that. 14 days is still the gold standard for quarantining if you've been exposed to COVID. So we're working through that with the health department. But those rules did take place on Monday. So we're working through that, and we'll probably work through it a little more in depth when Steve gets back on Monday. Also gearing up for the vaccines and when they're released. One of the things we're struggling with right now is there isn't a whole lot of clarity, I guess, as far as, you know, even if EMS personnel and firefighters are going to fall under the tier 1 distribution. We're hoping so. I know the state fire chiefs is strongly advocating for that, and they're strongly pushing for that. So I would expect we would fall under that tier 1. You know, as soon as that comes out and DC Bacus gets back, we're going to be in some pretty in-depth discussions next week, I think, regarding the vaccine and how we're going to distribute that. If we're going to help Wood County distribute that, you know, we have to check and see if it falls under our scope of practice within the state regulations, as far as if we can help even distribute the vaccines, as far as giving them. So all those are options. And like I said, I'll be discussing that with DC Bacus next week when he returns. So there's still a little bit of fogginess out there as far as, you know, the vaccines, but we do know they're coming, and we're trying to prep as best we can. Also, I put out a survey last week out of 39 employees we currently have working. I have 22 responses at this point. And it was just a survey to gauge a level of interest of who is absolutely sure they would take the vaccine, who's a little unsure, and who definitely would not. I'd like to share those statistics with you. So we've got 13, yes, absolutely, that would take the vaccine. We have 6 that are unsure at this time, and 3 who are saying they would absolutely not take the vaccine. And so I asked for comments on the unsures and the no's. So a lot of it seems to be they just don't know what the long-term effects are of the vaccine itself, and lack of information out there about the vaccine and long-term effects and things like that. So that seems to be, the majority of the uncertainty about the vaccine out there right now. And that's where our unsures and no's are coming from. That's all I have for the COVID update. Other than that, we've included some monthly statistics in your packet, some thank you letters and other correspondence. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have and ask Commission that you accept this report and place it on file.
I have a question. So at the health system, they've made it broadly available to have antibody testing for staff, presumably for a variety of reasons. Is that something you've thought about in terms of prioritizing or within the group for vaccine? First round, second round kind of thinking, or maybe it would be worth connecting with the health system about accessibility to that.
I think that would be wonderful if we could connect to it. Who would, maybe you can send me an email on who to connect with regarding that. Was that you?
I don't actually do that testing, but I do know the right people to connect with, so I'll do that for you.
That would be much appreciated. Yeah, I think that would be very worthwhile.
I think both for you and for the PD, that would be potentially useful.
Yes.
Okay.
Very good. Any other questions in the activities report? Pete, let me just ask you a question. You meet weekly with Wood County, right?
Bi-weekly, yes.
Bi-weekly. So can you just give us an update in terms of numbers?
Sure. So their numbers, I think they're still expecting a surge post Thanksgiving, but the numbers are actually dropping a little bit as far as number of hospitalizations, number of tests being done, and number of positives. So, it still remains at a high level, and they're not comfortable with that, and their staff is stressed for sure. But as of right now, things are looking a little bit better. But again, I think we're still expecting a surge post Thanksgiving, and we've got Christmas coming up and New Year's, and everybody wants to see 2020 gone. And I can see there being a lot of people celebrating together on even though they shouldn't. But I can see a lot of people wanting to see 2020 gone. But I think, and this is kind of what Wood County is telling us too, is that we're going to be looking into January before I think we see the surge numbers finally start dwindling off. So I don't know if Jen, if you agree with that.
I agree 100%. Yeah, that's all the indicators are that we're not out of the woods yet. Can I ask another question about vaccine in general?
Absolutely.
Is flu vaccine a condition of employment for you all or not?
Yeah, I don't believe it's not a condition for employment, but it is offered through the city. So.
And encouraged, I'm assuming.
Absolutely, it's encouraged, yes.
May be interesting to see if your uptake for the people who get flu vaccine traditionally is the same population who is up for the COVID vaccine or not.
Yeah, so it doesn't, I don't know if there's going to be a correlation between that, but it would certainly be worth looking at. But it just seems like, you know, the flu vaccine's been out there a long time, and every response I'm seeing is just, you know, either they think this vaccine was rushed through, or there's just, it's so new, there's a lack of information on the COVID vaccine. I think that's where the uncertainty lies within our department.
Well, and the technology is different from what we're used to as well.
Right.
With the first two being mRNA vaccines. So, I mean, it's understandable.
If I can chime in on that for a second.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah.
Thank you. I said this, Pete heard this on one of those community COVID calls, because I said it in that setting too. I think there's a fair number of people out there who had been hearing for quite a while that the vaccine was a long way off, and a lot of medical experts said it would be summer of 2021 at the earliest, probably later. At least that was being said at one point. And all of a sudden it's like right on our doorstep. And I think there are people who think it may have been rushed through, and that the safety tests of FDA and others haven't happened. So I think that the PR on this is really important to let people know that that's not necessarily the case. What you said, Jen, is probably very much true. It's not my world, that the technology is better, but just to let people know that it is safe and it hasn't been raced down the field, in a way that it shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, everything I've read is the multiple vaccines are safe. So, I think it is going to be an educational standpoint for sure. So thank you. Any other discussion? Fire department activities? Otherwise, I'll receive and place on file. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
Item 9, police department activities, training reports, and correspondence. Assistant Chief Seps.
Like Pete, not anything too earth-shattering to report here. I did receive word from the state of Wisconsin Department of Justice that they're going to be re-implementing the mandatory 24-hour recertification for this calendar year from July to June, but they are accepting virtual training across the board. So that's really good news on our end. So other than that, there's really nothing to report on that side, the typical virtual meetings and some virtual trainings. As far as COVID, we continue to do well. We have everybody back except one officer who did test positive, but all our quarantines are coming back today, other than that officer. We are finding that the exposures are coming outside of work. So again, I don't know if, to the extent I touched on this, but we had gone to an alternative schedule in the spring, a 6 on, 12 off. And I think there was reasons why that could have worked at that time that aren't in place now. Some of those reasons, our school was not in session. We were pretty much on a lockdown, and I don't think a lot of people were socializing at that point. So for us to go to that schedule now, essentially people are socializing and doing things off duty for the time that they're off. So we're really not finding any type of cross-contamination from people at work. And that's really a tribute to our staff. While they're here, they're really diligent with the masks. They do a good job. Our building is still set up to where our break rooms are socially distanced well in excess of 6 feet. We still are not doing any tours or ride-alongs of any kind. And our building usage is limited to things that are considered essential. Like Pete, we're a little bit in the dark as far as where we would fall into the vaccination tiers. I've not heard anything on the law enforcement side. Early on, I did hear that we would be considered as part of that overall first responder blanket, but nothing official has come down. As far as people who would take it, I haven't done any type of formal survey, but just in hearing talking in the hallways and speaking in passing, I think it would be very similar to Pete's situation at the fire department, that it is new. One of the interesting things I shared at the community COVID meeting was read a really good article on the Washington Post about the education of side effects. And I think that's one of the things people are very concerned about. And that article really touched on the fact that some side effects are normal, given that it's a more severe virus than the flu. So if people understand that they may have a bit of a fever for a day or some aches that go beyond what the flu vaccine is, I think that's a huge educational standpoint. So, and I think that's really something we got to look at here. As far as the vaccination, I have had some low-level inquiries from, I think we touched on it briefly, from Jay in our COVID meeting, and I also was reached out to by the security director of the clinic on just some measures when the vaccine arrives. And there's been no indication that there'll be any concern, but given some of the political climate around COVID and the vaccines, some of those initial inquiries were made to us as far as what type of help we could have on the security side. And I said, we're all in, we're going to give you whatever resources we can, and we're just going to have to look at what that might look like when it gets here. So other than that, I don't have much to report on activities, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Pat? Pat, I saw you had a meeting with the municipal court. Are you gonna start delivering warrants from municipal citations, or was that just?
Well, that was actually kind of an interesting learning curve for me. We haven't issued warrants on municipal citations since we can remember. And what I did is I brought Court Officer Dan Salachinsky in on that meeting. And so what the meeting was to try to get some of those municipalities down south, specifically Wisconsin Rapids, to consider using a collections agency instead of issuing a warrant on a municipal citation. Been talking with Officer Salachinsky, we've had good luck on that. Our collection rating, I think, is somewhere in the 80 percentile as far as collecting those funds and not issuing those warrants. So that was the crux of that meeting down there. I don't know that they've made any type of decision on that. It sounded like they were going to go status quo, but we're opening to looking on further on that. Does that answer your question?
So status quo is just collecting the money through the state tax intercept then?
Yeah, for us, it's using a collection agency. We have not issued warrants on those types of tickets.
Yeah, I didn't think we had in the past. I was just curious. Yep. Very good. Any other questions on the activities of the police department? All right, we'll go ahead and receive and place on file. Item 10, accept resignation and retirement of Administrative Associate 4, Peggy Linder, effective January 29, 2021.
This is probably not a big shock. I think words have been circulating about this for a while, but I would like to regretfully officially announce that Peg Linder is retiring from the police department. Her last official day on the payroll will be in the end of January. However, her last work day is December 15th. It's really hard for me to say enough nice things about Peg. She leaves us with over 23 years of experience and knowledge and the skills that come with that. And I know you're all familiar with her because she, had been so involved with the Police and Fire Commission for so many years. I just want to compliment her on her work ethic and dedication. I know in my time here, she's made my job immensely easier, and I probably would be lost without her at this point. She always quietly went about her job and did what was ever asked of her, not only for myself, but for every officer here. And it's just been an incredible resource. So with that, I'd like to announce her official retirement from the department and wish her well on the next steps in her life.
I think it goes without saying on behalf of, past mayor on our commission and Andy Keogh and other members of the commission that she is just exceptional. And, we just appreciate all of her hard work. And as she transitions into a new life stage, I'm sure she's very excited. Hopefully at some point we can see her at another meeting and say goodbye to her. That'll be a change for us, and we wish her the best. Yeah. Can I have a motion to accept the resignation?
I'll move.
And I have a second?
Second, with regret.
With regret, thank you. Any other discussion? And that will need a roll call vote, please.
Earl,
Yes.
Meese,
Yes, with regret.
Myers,
Yes, with regrets as well.
Keogh,
Yes.
Gershman.
Yes, with regret and sadness.
Well, I'd like to point out that she is not perfect. She always answers the phone by saying, "How can I help you?" And I said to her one time, "Well, if you really want to help, you can come and paint my kitchen." And she refused. She said she wouldn't do it. And I've been very disappointed about that.
Well, she's strong-willed too, right, Andy?
Yeah, right.
Thank you. Item 11, approve promotion of police records specialist Cindy Gates to administrative associate 4 position.
Yeah, so I think most of you are familiar with Cindy. She has subbed in for Peg at times. What I did was I really took a look at the city's internal transfer policy and went over that with HR Director Jen Rakew. And when I spoke to all the police record specialists we have, Cindy was the only one interested in that position. In fact, over the course of the last several months, she had expressed a lot of interest in it and had even done some low-level work with Peg to make sure that she had an understanding of what that position was. So the timeline kind of spread out a little strangely. By the time I got Peg's official resignation, what I did is I went to the finance, budget, and personnel because recently it was decided that all replacements have to go through them. So that meeting was on December 1st. And so I took this to finance, budget, and personnel, knowing that I would probably, hopefully get that approval before it came to this body. But thankfully they approved Cindy's position or internal transfer into this position, upon Cindy submitting a resume. One of the things I touched on was Cindy's been just an outstanding performer for us. Her last 3 years, she exceeds standards. She's a hard worker. She's got a really great knowledge of the department, the processes, and the personnel here. So her learning curve will be much shorter. And the reason I wanted to put her in place on December 8th is that it did give her an official full week of training with PEG. So I realized that there'll be a little doubling on the payroll there until the end of January, but we'll be able to absorb that. And I think that's for absolutely the betterment of the department. So Cindy did go in there yesterday, barring any objections from this body. And again, I hope I explained the decision of why I did that, just how the timeline spread out. So yeah, in her 15 years, she's done a great job for us and she's excited to move in there. And with that, I would ask for your approval to allow for the internal transfer of Cindy Getson to Peg Linder's position.
Do I have a motion?
Move approval of the transfer.
Thank you, Andy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? We could do a roll call, please.
Earl,
Yes.
Meese,
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
Myers,
Yes.
Keo,
Yes.
Gershman.
Yes, thank you. Item 12.
I think Steve had his hand up. Did you have a question?
Steve, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna make a comment. Thanks, Pat. The Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, it was back in October, they voted that all refilling positions need to go through them. And I did check with the city attorney's office, because obviously with the Police and Fire Commission and the Library Board having the authorities that they do, that becomes an issue as to whether or not the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee and ultimately the council could deny the refilling of a position. And the city attorney determined that they really do have that review authority. Now, the reason they're doing it right now is obviously because of tight finances. And I think some of you know we've been in a difficult situation lately. Took some great steps in the past year to move forward and I think get out of that. But, I assume it'll be a technicality, but he believes that because by hiring somebody new, let's say you take on a new employee to replace someone who's leaving, theoretically that employee could be here 20, 30, who knows how many years. It is obligating the city to future expenditures. So I don't expect any police or fire replacements to be questioned. The one that Pat brought forward certainly wasn't, but I wanted to be able to say that and answer any questions or bring back any questions for the city attorney that you might have.
So you suspect, Steve, this going forward, this will be more normal, is just to request the approval through finance and budget, regardless of, right now we're experiencing financial difficulties with the budget, but for a normal process, both departments, you'd want that. Is that right?
I think so, Randy. I think what the committee and the council as a whole are looking for is that we don't do routine approvals. Let's say we have an accounting clerk leave, and before we just rehire for an accounting clerk, well, what does that person do? Could those duties be taken on by someone else? Is there an opportunity to merge positions? I mean, they really want to push us a little bit to be looking at that. Now, I think, speaking for myself and for Jen, I think we do that all the time with department heads. We've actually made some changes in the past couple of years based on those reviews. But I don't think they're looking to say, well, you don't need this firefighter replaced or this police officer replaced. They know about what you do. They know about minimum staffing. But, they do want to be seen, I think, as doing their due diligence right now in what's a tough financial time.
Any questions for Steve while he's here? I think we should take advantage of the opportunity, Pat.
I just want to thank Steve for expounding on that, because there was some questions that went back and forth between me and Steve and Jen as far as structurally, where does that fall and where does finance, budget, and personnel fall in the scheme with Police and Fire Commission? So thank you for expounding on that. The other thing that I wanted to add that I don't think I mentioned was that part of that initial finance, budget, and personnel request was to replace Cindy Getz's position as a police record specialist, which they did approve. So we're going to begin advertising for that. I think that's gone out, and the goal was to advertise through that through the end of the month and then move on to the next step. So.
Yeah, and not to sound complacent about this for any reason, but they've had, I think, 7 or 8 replacements come forward in just the last 60 days, several of them related to the street department, and they've approved every one. So, I don't expect that there'll be a whole lot of refilling that's not going to be allowed with any departments, but I can't argue that it's a good check and balance.
And I think that's the best example. The term he used is check and balance, gives an opportunity for some oversight if there's a position that could be eliminated or merged, especially with the situation going forward. So Steve, thank you. Any other questions for Steve while we got him here on this matter? Very good, thank you. Item 12, distribution of 2021 financial review schedule, tentative regular meeting dates. That's just in your packet. There's no action to be taken on that. And with that, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting because there's no other business. Thank you all for attending. Another great discussion. Everybody have a great week, okay? Be safe.